If you've been collecting long enough, it's often useful to sit back and take stock of your collection, both in the literal sense of kind of running an inventory, making yearly updates, but also in the sense of looking at your collection as a project. And I recently did that over the past week. What I've noticed is that over the years, your collection kind of takes on a unique personality. It assumes a set of characteristics that comes to define it as a project and you as a collector. So, what I want to do today is, first and foremost, for myself, for posterity, but also just as kind of an interesting question, is kind of ask what kind of personality does my collection have? What defines it? And where might I want to take it in the future? So, I want to start at the beginning, and that would be with my Sega Genesis collection. And this is really important to me because these are the games that I grew up with. These are the games that I owned in my childhood, and I've held on to them for all these years. And it's kind of funny because I had an NES collection, an SNES collection, and I sold them off at various points when I thought, well, I can kind of emulate them and the prices are high enough where it made sense. But I never got around to doing that with the Sega Genesis stuff. And now, when I kind of look back, I see these as the link to my childhood. The games that I spent an inordinate amount of time with, games that really defined the hobby for me back in, I would say, the mid 90s. And all these games have certain memories. Mortal Kombat, for instance, I remember saving up for and purchasing it on day one. I got Bob after I completed the high dive swimming lesson at my local pool. The Master System stuff came a bit later. I have great memories of playing Sonic 2 in a friend's basement all summer. So, RBI baseball home run contests. These are the games that I think I will always keep, regardless of if they go up in price, and they probably won't. But I see this as the start for me of video game collecting as a project. So, if we continue on this chronological journey, the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1 would come next. And PlayStation 1 was really the first console that I purchased with my own money. And I have a rather modest PlayStation 1 collection, but these are games that I really enjoyed a lot in high school into kind of just past high school graduation. And then around that time, of course, the Sega Saturn was released in the United States. I didn't own it. I've talked a lot about the Sega Saturn in many, many videos, but I feel like the Sega Saturn connects me back to that time as well. And I've always favored the Japanese Saturn. I've talked, again, extensively about my Sega Saturn collection. Then kind of the Dreamcast was the last console release of my childhood. Didn't have it back in the day, but had to pick up kind of a modest Dreamcast collection. And then you just see here some loose TurboGrafx, Super Graphics, PC Engine stuff that I see kind of connected to this time and kind of the CD-based era. This is a shelf that I think kind of combines two eras. We see my GameCube collection came to GameCube rather late and just kind of picked up some of the core titles that interested me. I was way more into PlayStation 2 and to a lesser extent Xbox. But I also have here the remnants of my SNES collection, which is just behind this stack, and then my N64 collection, which really did play a big role in my high school years, particularly with the wrestling games. So it's kind of an afterthought shelf in a way, but I would like to get into more GameCube collecting. So when we talk about defining characteristics of a collection, I think for me that would be the video game magazines that I save. These are by and large, these are my original magazines that I received as a child. Started with GamePro, got into EGM. EGM was truly one of my favorite magazines of the era. And so in print format, I have really the history that I lived. And they're all in pretty good condition for the most part, except for that buyer's guide that you can see torn up there. I do have a mixture of Nintendo Power that I bought at the newsstand and then purchased on eBay. And then I subscribed to Retro Gamer for a few years, and I thought that was really a nice magazine, well laid out, very interesting articles, good historical perspective on the hobby. So I've said previously that I would never get rid of the magazines because I think that is really kind of the essence of my video game memories. And of course, here to the side, just the remnants of my early handheld collection. Most of the handheld games that I had, I sold off, but I really kind of like this part of the collection, and I do go back and read these magazines from time to time. And of course, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that as far as magazines go, I really got into collecting new type magazines about 2 or 3 years ago because I feel like they are just these fascinating time capsules of what was going on in Japan at the time that I kind of started to get into gaming. So late 80s through the year 2000 is kind of the focus of that collection. As I've said previously, great artwork, and you can actually read the updates on the latest games that were coming out. So I got into this when it was relatively cheap and just kind of got addicted to it, and I have a pretty substantial collection, which I'm pretty proud of. And I think that's another defining characteristic of the collection I've put together is really a focus on Japanese games, whether Japanese games that made it to the West and were localized or actually imports. And you can kind of see that here with the PSP collection. I've really tried to go after a lot of the key JRPGs on the PSP and started importing certain games for the PSP as well as the PlayStation 3. So I feel like the PSP kind of captures that last remnant of the PS1 era of JRPGs, and I've tried to represent that in the collection I've put together. So the importing bug really started with the King of Colosseum games for the PlayStation 2. I figured out how to mod the PS2, and as I was ending my run of PS2 collecting back when it was still an active console, I found myself picking up a lot of import games, again, starting with the wrestling stuff and then moving on. And I've talked a number of times about how the PlayStation 2 is a console that I don't think I'll ever be done collecting for. There are just so many games to discover. I'm constantly finding new things to pick up and new games to import, quite frankly. So I won't go into the PS2 stuff in detail, but it does represent the bulk of my collection. I have more PlayStation 2 games than I have games for any other console. Now, the PlayStation 3 kind of continued that importing itch. I created a Japanese PSN account, and as I was sort of buying the kind of normal third-party, first-party games for the PlayStation 3, I was also importing. And this was a console I had in graduate school, spent quite a bit of time playing it, and so it really has those memories of kind of being the console where I purchased it really at the start of my adult life, but it was the console that allowed me to continue gaming and where I just kind of continued the project of learning about the import culture, the different games. It was a console where I started playing Mahjong games, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. As you know, Mahjong is kind of a big thing for me. So the PlayStation 3 is a console that really spanned a really interesting time in my life. So now we move on to the top shelves, and while top shelf may often designate a type of high-level or elite product, for me it's just storing stuff that I don't have space for anywhere else, and that first shelf is just kind of a mishmash of things that I just found cool, sort of shrink-wrapped NES games, a lot of empty boxes, some starting lineup figures, but it's mostly boxes, special edition boxes, some Mahjong magazines, got the Virtual Boy. So I just kind of like throwing stuff together up there that has no other place. And then on the other side of the closet, I've continued with the boxes, this time mostly game boxes or outer cases for modern games, things that come in steel books, and you don't really want to destroy the outer case, so you just stack them. But I have everything from Virtual Boy boxes to Super Famicom game boxes, and it's maybe not the most efficient way to keep them, but I think it has the potential, at least stacked like this, to have the least damage. So I want to move on to looking at some special projects kind of within the collection. And the first thing is sports games. I do love sports games. I think they're underappreciated. I did a whole video about that, and particularly for the PlayStation 2 era. So within my PlayStation 2 collection, I have a lot of sports games, and I'm proud of that. I play them to this day. I think they combine video game nostalgia with sports nostalgia, and I won't give them up. I really do enjoy them. And then, of course, Mahjong games. I really got into collecting physical Mahjong games. I have a lot for the Saturn. I couldn't pull them all out for this video. The game that you see there in green is actually a Nintendo Mahjong game, kind of like Mario Party with Mahjong. So that is an aspect of my collection that I really enjoy. I know no one likes Mahjong. It's not played a lot, but I've had a lot of fun with Mahjong games over the years. Another kind of sub-collection is the Persona series. I've really tried to go after all the Persona Shin Megami Tensei games that have come out really since the PlayStation 3 era. That's when I got into the series. I don't have the original PlayStation games or the Famicom versions, but I really enjoyed Persona, and I find them to be some of the most rewarding modern RPGs. So to the best of my ability, I'm trying to collect every release from the PlayStation 4 until today. And this is just a sampling of some of the ones that I could pull out of the collection pretty easily. And then the last kind of mini project in the collection would be a complete Yakuza collection. I have, at this point, every game in the Yakuza series that has released in North America, and I'm going to continue collecting those games. They are really my favorite modern video games. I think, and I've talked about this many, many times, they do so much well. They're both nostalgic and interesting, quirky. So these will be kind of a mainstay of my collection, and I look forward to the newest Judgment game, which I think is coming out at the end of September. So I just want to finish up talking about the handheld collection. We have here a number of DS and 3DS games, also PlayStation Vita games. I was not a huge fan of the DS, but as you know, I'm a super fan of the 3DS. So this collection has really grown, I would say, over the past 3 or 4 years. And I haven't played all of these, but I feel like I have a good backlog of handhelds. And the PlayStation Vita, which I didn't necessarily enjoy as much, but if I can find a unique Vita game, I do enjoy playing it because it is a good piece of hardware. Another perhaps unique aspect of my collection is a very small but personally meaningful collection of art books. And I got into art book collecting really solely because of the Happy Console Gamer. He did an episode on art books maybe 8-9 years ago. And I was like, wow, I love the magazines, and maybe the art books will be a nostalgic experience. And sure enough, they were. So I've collected art books for both video games, video game series that I liked, and also certain anime that I found interesting. And yeah, they do convey that same type of nostalgia. Particularly the ones from Japan are so well laid out. I often find that, I can sit down, as corny as this might sound, sit down with a drink and kind of go through some of these books and relive some memories that I've had with these shows in these series. So next up we have my modern Nintendo collection of Wii and Wii U games. Wasn't a huge fan of the Wii, but I nonetheless thought there were certain games I wanted to focus on, and I think I have most all of them. And then the Wii U, which I really enjoyed and I think is going to be a very, very collectible console moving forward. Did a whole video about that not too long ago. So I'm pretty satisfied with where the state of this collection is. There's probably just a couple of Wii U games that I would like to pick up, but for the most part, I would say this is more or less complete in the state that I'd like it. And we will continue with my Xbox collection, original Xbox, Xbox 360. There was really no rhyme or reason to what I collected for on the Xbox consoles. The perhaps uniting principle would be that if I thought the game ran better on those consoles, I would pick it up on an Xbox. So really the only unique thing would be that I did import a lot of the shmups that came out on the Xbox 360. I thought that was a unique aspect of Xbox collecting about a decade ago, but beyond that, there's nothing special to set this apart. And then over the years, I've added to it pretty much just at random. I went through a phase where I wanted to get a lot of the Xbox sports games that I missed. Found just a couple additional Xbox 360 games that were interesting, and then have an Xbox One collection. I've since moved on to Game Pass, so I don't anticipate too many more Xbox One physical purchases, but that was just kind of the remnants of the Xbox collection. And right next to it, you have PlayStation 2 games that I picked up more recently. These are games that I kind of had my eye on over the years and put together kind of after the PlayStation 2's life cycle. Then, of course, I have some stray PS3 games as well. And then, of course, the Nintendo Switch collection, relatively small. I've been a critic of the Nintendo Switch, but I think recently they have come out with some games, talked about it just a couple weeks ago. There are some kind of niche titles that I'm finding interesting, so I've started to really focus on the Switch, and I have some room to grow. And lastly, my PlayStation 4 collection, which has been growing of late. And I think this is emblematic of another feature or characteristic of my collection, is that you've probably noticed I do have a lot of sealed games. And that's really not by design, it's just kind of a circumstance. I purchase games that I think I will enjoy and that I have every intent to play, but sometimes I just wind up not playing them. And as a result, they remain sealed, and of course, some of them have become rather valuable over the years. My thought about that is if it is super valuable and I haven't played it in 5 to 10 years, I'm not going to open it. But a lot of the times it might take me 6 months to get to one of these games. So I do have an intention to play them, but really throughout the collections that you've seen today, there are a fair number of sealed games. So there you have it, my game collection as of August 2021. And I would encourage everyone who's been collecting to do this from time to time, create an inventory, reorganize, and in the process take some time to appreciate the game collection that you've put together over the years. It doesn't matter how big or how small. A game collection is a very personal project, and it's nice to sit back and take stock of everything, appreciate the work, the time, the resources, the energy, and the taste that has gone into it, and to kind of see your personal development over the years as a collector. It's been very rewarding for me, and it's something I will continue to do about once every 1 or 2 years.